Heidegger, a 20th century German philosopher, is known for his exploration of human existence and how we relate to the world. In his work Being and Time, Heidegger discusses the importance of focus and attention in our understanding of being and existence. He argues that our experience of the world is shaped by how we focus on things and how we relate to them through our attention. Therefore, focus is a fundamental aspect of his phenomenological philosophy. In his principal work, Heidegger develops his concept of human existence, which he calls Dasein. This term, commonly translated as being there, refers to how human beings are immersed in the world and relate to it. One of Heidegger's key ideas is that the way we experience the world is influenced by our mode of being in it, that is, through our attention and focus. He argues that we usually live in a state of distraction, concerned with our daily worries and routines, which prevents us from truly experiencing the world as it is. This distraction leads us to live in a state of fallenness or inauthenticity. For Heidegger, focus and attention are essential to overcoming this fallenness and accessing a more authentic understanding of being. He suggests that by consciously directing our attention to things, we can begin to experience them more authentically and understand their meaning in relation to our own being. For example, when we focus on an object like a stone, we not only see it as an inanimate object but also begin to appreciate its being in the world, its history, its relationship with other objects, and its significance to us as human beings. According to Heidegger, Dasein is fundamentally temporal and immersed in the world within the context of its historical and cultural existence. Each individual experiences Dasein uniquely but shares certain basic characteristics. The concept of Dasein is closely related to the theme of focus and attention. Heidegger argues that this concept is always directed toward the world and the objects within it. This orientation toward the world implies a form of attention or focus that determines how we experience and understand reality. Heidegger criticizes the traditional view of philosophy that considers human beings as subjects confronting external objects objectively. Instead, he suggests that our relationship with the world is more fundamental and is influenced by our existential situation and our cultural and historical context. Focus and attention are key aspects of this relationship between Dasein and the world. Through our focus on specific objects and situations, we reveal aspects of the world and ourselves that would otherwise remain hidden. In Heidegger's context, concentration could be interpreted as an aspect of Dasein's attitude toward the world and itself. When we concentrate on something, we direct our attention intensely and focusedly toward a specific object, task, or experience. This intensive attention can reveal deeper and more meaningful aspects of reality, as it allows us to immerse ourselves in the present experience without the usual distractions of existence. Moreover, concentration could also be considered a form of resistance to fallenness, which Heidegger defined as the tendency to live in a state of distraction and superficiality. By concentrating on specific moments and concrete experiences, we can counteract this tendency and access a fuller and more meaningful understanding of being. Heidegger's work is usually understood as divided into two distinct periods. The first is marked by Being and Time, a work that, despite remaining incomplete, presents many of the central ideas of his entire thought. In it, the author assumes that the task of philosophy consists of determining fully and completely the meaning of being, not of entities, understanding being in general as that which establishes and sustains concrete entities in existence. These categories help him understand where the difference lies between an authentic life that recognizes the fallen nature of existence, that is, the impossibility of mastering its foundation, and an inauthentic or alienated life that forgets being in the name of concrete entities. Carl Jung, an influential Swiss psychologist and founder of analytical psychology, had his own ideas about concentration and attention, although his approach was more psychological and analytical than philosophical, like Heidegger's. Carl Jung, whose impact on the field of psychology transcends generations, is recognized as one of the pioneers in exploring the human mind in its entirety. His approach was oriented toward the integration of the conscious and unconscious aspects of the psyche. In this sense, Jung addressed the topic of concentration and attention from a deeply psychological and analytical perspective, exploring how these faculties could contribute to the harmonization and development of the person. For Jung, concentration was not simply an act of directing attention toward a specific task but a broader process of psychological integration. He posited that proper concentration required a harmonization between the conscious and unconscious mind, recognizing the importance of both aspects in human experience. This integration would not only allow for greater self-understanding but also the resolution of internal conflicts and authentic development. One of the tools Jung recommended to achieve this harmonization was the practice of active introspection. This technique was not limited to merely observing conscious thoughts and feelings but also involved paying attention to the images, symbols, and emotions that arose from the unconscious. Through this active exploration of one's psyche, Jung believed that one could gain a deeper understanding of oneself and the internal processes that influence behavior and life experience. Jung also distinguished between two types of attention: diffuse attention and focused attention. According to him, diffuse attention, which allows the mind to wander freely, was essential for creativity and problem solving, as it enabled unconscious connections and associations to occur. However, Jung also recognized the importance of focused attention for completing specific tasks and maintaining concentration in the present. In this regard, he considered it crucial to find a balance between these two types of attention for personal development and individual fulfillment. To understand how Carl Jung applied his perspective on concentration in his life, we can examine his clinical practice and his own process of self-exploration and inner development. In his clinical work, Jung used the technique of floating attention, a form of diffuse attention that allowed him to attune to the unconscious associations of his patients while remaining receptive and open to the revelations that emerged in the moment. This involved a flexible and receptive concentration that was not limited by preconceived expectations or judgments. By adopting this attitude of attention, Jung could access deep aspects of his patients' psyches and facilitate their process of self-exploration and healing. Moreover, Jung also applied active introspection in his own life, regularly exploring his dreams, fantasies, and personal symbols to better understand his psyche and his place in the world. Through this practice, Jung was able to consciously integrate the contents of the unconscious into his conscious life, which allowed him to develop greater self-awareness and authenticity in his being. A notable example of how Jung applied this integration between conscious and unconscious attention in his life is his concept of individuation. For Jung, individuation was a process of personal development that involved integrating the different aspects of the psyche, both conscious and unconscious, to achieve greater completeness and authenticity. Throughout his life, Jung dedicated time and effort to exploring his own psychological depths and integrating the revelations that emerged from his unconscious into his conscious life. This process of individuation not only enriched his understanding of himself but also influenced his theoretical work and clinical approach. Robert Greene wrote, "Preserve your strength and energy by keeping them focused on their strongest point. You will gain more by discovering a rich vein and exploiting it deeply than by moving from one poor vein to another. Intensity always triumphs over dispersion." Dr. John Ainslow masterfully expressed this idea in one of his famous fables titled The Goose and the Horse. In the fable, a goose grazing in a meadow felt annoyed by a horse grazing nearby. Aggressively, the goose said, "There is no doubt that I am a more noble and perfect animal than you, given that the extent and range of your faculties are limited to a single element. I can walk on the ground as well as you, and I also have wings to soar through the air. When I wish, I can swim in lakes and ponds and refresh myself in the coolness of the waters. I enjoy the powers of birds, fish, and quadrupeds." The horse, somewhat disdainfully, replied, "It is true that you inhabit the three elements, but you do not perform remarkably in any of them. You fly, yes, but your flight is so clumsy and heavy that you have no right to compare yourself to swallows or larks. You can swim on the surface of the waters, but you cannot live beneath them like fish. You cannot feed in that element or dive to the bottom of the waves, and when you walk on the ground with your wide feet, stretching your long neck and hissing at anyone who passes near you, you only attract ridicule and contempt from those who see you. I confess that I am made to move only on the land, but how graceful are my movements, how elegant the lines of my body, how graceful my limbs, how great my strength, and how astonishing my speed. I prefer to be limited to a single element and be admired in it than, like you, to be mediocre in all." This fable illustrates a powerful lesson about focus and specialization. If one is not in danger, do not fight. This is a physical law: what inflates beyond its proportions inevitably bursts. The mind should not jump from one goal to another or let success distract it from its purpose and sense of proportion. What coheres, concentrates, and connects with the past is power. What dissipates, divides, and stretches out rots and collapses. The more something inflates, the harsher its destruction will be. The world is plagued by increasing divisions, in countries, political groups, families, and even individuals. We find ourselves in a state of total distraction and dispersion, barely able to keep our minds oriented in one direction without being distracted and pulled in 100 others. The level of conflict in the modern world is higher than ever, and we have internalized it in our own lives. The solution lies in retreating inward, as Carl Jung said, toward more concentrated forms of thinking and acting. As Schopenhauer wrote, the intellect is a magnitude of intensity, not a magnitude of extension. Napoleon knew the value of concentrating his forces at the enemy's weakest point. That was the secret of his success on the battlefield. But his willpower and mind were also shaped according to that concept. Mob wrote, perseverance and firmness of purpose, total concentration on one goal, and the use of these qualities against those who are less focused and in a greater state of distraction constitute an arrow that will always hit the mark and subdue the enemy. Casanova wrote, "I was always convinced that if a man sets his mind on doing a certain thing and dedicates himself exclusively to that goal, he will undoubtedly achieve it despite all difficulties." Robert Greene wrote, "Focus on one objective, on one task, and do not yield until you achieve or complete it. You cannot hit two targets with one arrow. If your thoughts are distracted, they will not hit the heart of your enemy. It is necessary for the mind and the arrow to become one. Only with this type of mental and physical concentration can your arrow hit the target and pierce the heart." Baltasar Gracián, a Spanish Jesuit writer, philosopher, and priest, is recognized for his literary works and his influence on philosophical and moral prose of his time. Although he was criticized in his time by some of his contemporaries due to his pragmatic approach and sophisticated literary style, Gracián is today recognized as one of the most important writers of the Spanish Golden Age and a prominent exponent of Baroque literature. Gracián wrote about concentration and focus as follows: "Value intensity more than extension. Perfection lies in quality, not quantity. Mere extension never rises above mediocrity, and the misfortune of men with very broad and dispersed interests is that, while they want to dip their spoon in every dish, they end up not dipping it in any. Intensity brings eminence and turns heroic deeds into sublime ones." Concentration is a more vital topic in our lives than we think. We are constantly focused on something, even if we do not realize it. The problem is that we do not know how to differentiate what and why. This is where Jung's concept of inner introspection comes into play. Be aware of your life and do not let the years pass unnoticed. Evaluate your reality and focus on what you know is productive for you personally. As Napoleon Hill wrote, "Remember that time is an enemy that does not tolerate indecision." To conclude, I quote Carl Jung, "Where your attention is, there you are." Each time we learn to concentrate, we gain additional psychic energy. The primary goal of life is individuation, the process by which a person becomes themselves, achieving differentiation from the herd and the collective unconscious. The self needs the resistance that attention provides, just as a candle needs a wick to withstand the wind.